Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of the BigSpeak Webinar Series. This is Leveraging Emotional Intelligence Under Pressure with Dr. JP Pawliw-Fry and Bill Benjamin. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. My name is Marianne Kuga and I'm the marketing manager here at BigSpeak. So this series started last week in hopes that we could provide support to all of you and really anyone who needs support as we navigate through this difficult period. We've partnered with a variety of speakers to discuss topics including leadership, emotional intelligence, future of work, and really anything else that might be helpful. So I think I speak for everyone when I say that this last week, or the week since our last broadcast, has been rough. The world turned upside down and we are definitely all feeling it. If you were with us last week, welcome back and thank you for joining us again. As you can see, I have relocated from our office as our team members are practicing social distancing and working from home for the time being. And as someone who's never worked virtually for more than a few days at a time, I'm right there with the thousands or maybe even millions of others around the world who are learning best practices for full-time remote work, like getting dressed as though you're going to leave the house today, which I am not. And just as a side note, spring has officially sprung in Santa Barbara, which means my allergies have officially sprung, and I've been getting sneezy and hoarse over the past couple of days with absolutely no warning, so I apologize if that interrupts anything today. Okay, let's get to it. I'd like to introduce our two guests today, Dr. JP Pawliw-Fry and Bill Benjamin from the Institute of Health and Human Potential. JP is the New York Times bestselling author of Performing Under Pressure and is a performance coach to NHL and NBA teams and Olympic medal winning athletes. Bill holds advanced degrees in mathematics and computer science and has over 30 years of business experience. They're both emotional intelligence experts, and we are extremely grateful for their participation in this series as their expertise is so valuable in times like these. So before I turn this over to JP and Bill, I want to remind everyone that you can submit questions via the tab on the control panel. Feel free to send your questions at any time. We're going to be monitoring the questions list and answering them throughout the presentation. And now, JP and Bill, I will turn it over to you guys.
Great, thank you so much. I'm Bill Benjamin. JP, do you have the slides in presentation mode? I'm just asking because I don't see them.
Yeah, let me see what I can do here, Bill.
Let's get the slides going. But I just want to start out by saying huge thanks to BigSpeak. What a great thing you're doing. I mean, we're all struggling. You know, my kids are at home, our business is being impacted, and we're just so excited because, you know, we know that the work that we do around managing emotions and emotional intelligence, it's helping me right now through this challenging time, and we know it can help all of you. So in terms of what you're going to learn today, we're going to start by sharing a new idea, a new concept that we call the last 8%. And you're going to learn what last 8% moments are and why they're important. And gosh, we're all in a last 8% moment right now. JP, if you want to move the slides forward, that would be great. The way this software works, only one of us can move the slides. All right, secondly, you're going to understand, you know, the importance of emotional intelligence during a time of crisis and how you can approach your last 8% moment skillfully. And finally, we're going to teach a brain-based strategy that you can use to manage the emotions, the anxiety, the tension, the stress, all the pressure you're feeling. So that's where we're headed. JP, over to you to get us going.
Sure. Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Marianne. It's great to be here. This is a difficult time. Marianne, I like the way you set that up. You as well, Bill. Have we faced a pandemic and a crisis like this in all of our lifetimes? The answer is no, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling overwhelmed, just know you're not alone. And what we're hoping that we can do today is offer you some, as Bill said, some ideas around how can we manage ourselves? How can we become students of human behavior so we can be closer to our best? We won't be perfect, but closer to our best when we have to make tough decisions, when we have to interact with people, when there's lots of change and uncertainty. So it's great to be here. Thank you, Bill. Bill and I have been together for many, many years, and as we like to say, we get to double the fun and half the pain. This is a half the pain time for sure. So here's the thing. each of us come to this webinar, we're at stages in our life where we have an aspiration, both for our organization and ourselves. And in fact, right now you could say it's to survive and to adapt, right? Because there's so much change going on, we are worried. And so an aspiration is just to survive and adapt. But we also individually have an aspiration to be an exceptional leader, or to be an effective coach, or to be a good decision maker, a great listener. And given many of us are at home working, we want to be a great partner, great parent. And so we all have this aspiration. Everyone, you're here because you want to learn something. You want to be an aggressive learner. My favorite stat of all of our research, I think maybe you saw in the intro, but or in the write-up, we survey over 40,000 people a month at IHHP. We're really proud of that. And one of my favorite stats over the last 20 years is this one. High performers are imperfect. We will be imperfect during this time. But high performers extract 3 to 5 times more information from the same opportunity to learn as an average performer. So think about that, right? We have an aspiration, we want to get somewhere, and in order to do that, we need to be aggressive in our learning. And so what we want you to walk away with is, what are the things that are going to get in our way of meeting this aspiration? Because something gets in our way. And that something is the challenge we're facing right now, and specifically what we call the last 8%. So let me kind of go back a bunch of years, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I'm mediating a conversation between a CEO and their second in command. And I'm actually coaching each of them separately. And then I'm mediating a conversation because they weren't getting along. And it was really impacting the business. We had the conversation, we finished the conversation. I asked them separately after, how did that go? They thought it went great. Did you say everything you wanted to say? They both said, yeah. I said, okay, then I said, are you sure you said everything? And they said, well, one of them said, this is separately. One of them said, no, I didn't. And then the other said, well, actually, I didn't say that. And what became absolutely clear is that they weren't having the full conversation. And in fact, one of them says, when I asked what percentage, yeah, somewhere between 5 and 10%. And this is where it started. So the last 8% is the hardest part of a conversation that we might be, and this is where it started. So I want you to think about a conversation you've needed to have with somebody at home, at work. We get to 85, 90, 92% of what we want to say. But when we get to that last 8%, we start to sense that they're getting triggered, they're getting emotional. We get infected by their emotion. And then all of a sudden, as opposed to approaching that last 8%, we avoid it. And the problem is that they can't read our mind. They don't know we didn't have the full conversation. And in fact, we leave that conversation thinking we talked about most of the stuff we wanted to talk about, but it's only after the fact that we really recognize, no, maybe we didn't. So this is where it started. And in this difficult time, we're going to need to have difficult conversations. So it started with conversations. And then as we started to do more research, we realized it's not just conversations, it's also difficult decisions. And in fact, it's going beyond that now to different clients now who are working with. We see that it's actually even more global. There are parts of a moment, of a situation that we avoid. And so I think right now with what's going on, we're facing a lot of last 8% situations, decisions, and conversations.
Great. And I think what's really cool about this last 8% is, JP, you came up with a concept and we did some research behind it. We survey 40,000 people a month, and people have actually said, yeah, you know what, on average, I'm pretty good at 92% of making decisions, of dealing with tough situations, of having conversations. But that last 8% is when something happens. And I'll give you a little preview of what's going to happen. Our emotions get triggered. We're going to get to that. But some of the reactions, our JP talked about this, we sometimes avoid a difficult decision. We avoid a difficult conversation, or we avoid stepping into something. And that's really common. But there's the other side of it. So for me, sometimes if I'm in a meeting and right now I'm a little anxious and a decision's not getting made, maybe I don't avoid, maybe I start interrupting people. Or maybe I start becoming more directive. And now I'm making a mess of the situation. People are being impacted. And yes, I made a decision, but they don't feel included. They didn't feel involved. They're not engaged. And so there just tends to be these two reactions: this avoid or make a mess. And for most of us, we do some of both. Some of us a little more than others, but there's really those two reactions. Oh,
And what
JP,
we'd like everyone to recognize is right now to know that we have what we call a predictable default behavior, right? We predictably fall into one of these two camps when we're under pressure. And so what I want you to think about right now, are you more of an avoider, or are you more of a make a messer, so to speak? Because that matters. If you don't know what you do, it's really hard then to manage it. Because the problem is that if we get into avoiding or making a mess, if we're not able to manage our emotions and find that middle way, there are consequences. And there's really two consequences. First, to our external reputation. People see that we're not willing to make the difficult decisions, to be decisive. They're seeing us not willing or able to step in and give that difficult feedback in a conversation. And so they start to lose trust in us. And so for a mission critical project, do they want to choose us if they're not sure we're going to be able to execute? Well,
and JP, for those that were listening to General Tom last week, he talked about the keys in leadership. I mean, one of the number one, I can't remember, Marianne, if it was number 1 or 3, but trust. Like right now, people need to feel trust in their leaders.
Yeah.
And so avoiding decisions, I mean, we don't want to rush into decisions, right? We don't want to make a mess of them, but we also don't want to avoid. So that this part of making these last 8% decisions is critical to the trust.
Yeah, absolutely, Bill. Here's the other thing though. When we avoid or make a mess, we start to, it affects how we see ourselves, our internal reputation. We start to feel, in our research, we are learning from folks that we start to feel regret and shame because we know we took an off ramp. We knew we took the weak route, so to speak. And when the problem is that it diminishes our confidence. So the next time we face a last 8% situation, decision, or conversation, now that's a neural pathway that's been put down into our brain. And that becomes, again, our more predictable default behavior. And you start to see it becomes a cycle. And this is almost what we're like, wanting you to walk away with is know your cycle, know your predictable default behavior. And it's not easy, by the way, to switch it, but you can. And the good news is that you can learn to do this. This is what we do with Olympic athletes over many years, right? We build neural pathways. And so the great news is you can do something about it. Don't feel, oh my gosh, it's hopeless. It's absolutely not. But know what are you, more avoider or make a messer, and then what consequence might it be having?
Yeah, and where it really starts is being able to recognize, well, what are your last 8% situations, decisions, and conversations? So what we're going to ask you to do now is we're going to do an interaction. We're going to ask you to go to the question area. And as you've been listening to us, if you've been thinking of, gosh, I can think of a last 8% moment I just had this morning where I interrupted someone, or for me, we'd love to hear you share in the question area. What are some examples of last 8% moments? I mean, especially given everything that's going on. While we're waiting for that, we have a question from Jeannie. She says, "Can you give an example of Olympic athletes in last 8%?" So while JP's answering that, we'd love for all of you to share your last 8% moments in the question area.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeannie. Great question. The worst thing you can do is to leave an Olympic Games feeling like you didn't take your shots, feeling like the games, you spent all this time preparing, you get to the games, and the competition is over like that. It's over so quickly. And so you don't want to fly home feeling regret. I've had that occasion once, and it's the worst feeling. And when we look back at it in a retrospective with the athletes, it's because they avoided, because they actually the truth is that I've had for a couple of different athletes both avoid and make a mess. but it's like they felt like the situation overwhelmed them and they went tentative. That would be, it's not always that, but that's been the bigger pattern. Got tentative and didn't trust themselves. And I'll say this, why that's a good story, I hope, for transferring to what all of us face, because we're not Olympic athletes on this webinar, is that we will face challenging situations where we feel a bit at sea. And this is when we have to double down on trusting our gut. It's why we have to work with others and you know, talk to other people so we can understand, you know, do I have a good reality test of what's going on right now? But then to really trust our gut. So great question, Jeannie.
Yeah, great. And by the way, thank you, JP. And we've got some great responses. I just want to share so you all know we're all going through these challenging situations. You know, and I won't attach names to these, but you know, we've got constructive feedback to employees. Not quite everything you really wanted to say to them, trying to soften the blow. I mean, especially right now, right? It feels like, oh my gosh, well, they're stressed, they're anxious, but boy, do they still need the feedback, right? You still need them performing, so that's tough. Gosh, talking with my spouse about finances is definitely last 8% I avoid. Gosh, aren't we all experiencing that and having to have those tough conversations? I'm avoiding trying to tell family members outright that I prefer they come home. They're in the US right now. We live in Canada, right? Just speaking our truth. We've got somebody saying not asking a follow-up question, you know, and avoiding something. Hesitating to be forthright, knowing it may mean, you know, you don't get something you want. Making the decision that is best, but not the, you know, but that makes others uncomfortable. So thank you so much. And there's, by the way, lots more examples we don't have time to share, but it's clear we're all facing some last 8% moments right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So what do we do? What's the plan? So we all have this aspiration that JP and I talked about to survive, to adapt, and even to lead our families, lead our teams, lead our organizations. How can we skillfully approach the last 8%? Well, let's look at 3 areas of competence, you know, that we all operate within. These are what defines, you know, how successful we are in any given situation. There's our IQ. That's how smart we are. For most of us, that's actually pretty much fixed after age 16. So it's hard to get a whole lot smarter. Then there's our technical skills and job knowledge. So Marianne, that's everything you know about marketing. That's everything JP and I know about speaking or running our business, or, you know, somebody in technology. That's what they know about programming and databases. Then there's everything else that's come to be known as our emotional intelligence. And what we need in times like this is all 3. Right? We need to make our best cognitive decisions. We need to be thoughtful and planning and strategic. But what the research shows, the research from Harvard University, the research that we've done and many others, is that if we have a high levels of IQ and technical skills, but low levels of EQ, people don't care. It doesn't have the impact we want. We've got to be able to manage our emotions, connect to the emotions of others, so that they can listen to us, they can hear our ideas, we can hear them. And in fact, IQ and technical skills are threshold competencies. So, you know, the focus right now is not necessarily on, you know, how can you get more IQ or technical skills? You're all in this webinar because you get that the differentiator is going to be emotional intelligence and how well we can manage the stress, the anxiety, and connect with others and empathize and lead and manage the emotions that come up in our last 8% moments. So that's the key, is emotional intelligence right now. Favorite quote I love to share from Warren Buffett. You probably didn't think I was going to quote Warren Buffett in an emotional intelligence session, but he said, if you have an IQ of 150, sell 30 points to someone else. You need to be smart, but not a genius. Okay? So sure, it helps to be smart, but we don't need super geniuses. That's not what's going to get us through right now.
Yeah, Bill, I think you make a great point here. And just so people understand, like there's kind of 2 parts. There's how we manage ourselves, and that's almost helpful to go to our model to understand it, right? There's that self-awareness. When I'm under pressure, when I'm facing the last 8% situation or conversation or decision, I will feel, and we're going to talk about this in a minute in terms of what pressure does to our brain, but I'm going to feel something. So what are the skills that we have to actually know we're feeling some emotion and then manage it and self-soothe. And this is, I mean, quite frankly, I feel so lucky to be able to do this work, whether it be Olympic athletes or US Navy, Army, and those kind of groups, or all of us on the webinar. Because I mean, it's interesting. Yesterday, you know, at our company, we're facing a lot of our programs being canceled. And so, you know, our challenge as a senior team to ourselves and our organization is, okay, it's time for us to step up and manage our emotions, to be aware, to not push them away, but to actually sit with them, because that's a big part of managing emotions. Because here's what we know, the data is really clear on this. If we're not able to be self-aware or able to manage our emotions, what happens is that it's impossible to connect with others. We get self-referential. We make it all about us. We have trouble thinking outside of ourselves. And when that happens, we're not nearly as effective, and we're not able to lead ourselves in the way that we'd like to lead ourselves, to model. As I like to say to parents, don't worry that your child doesn't always listen to you. Worry that they're constantly watching you. And so for us, it is, okay, you know, let's do our best to grow these skills. And by the way, you already have these skills, but let's hone these skills. Let's make them better. Let's use this situation as an opportunity to practice using these skills so that we can lead our families and our organizations just a little bit more. And so let's start by going with self-awareness. Bill, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry to interrupt, JP. I just want to share that whole model that you just presented is a full day training program. And so today we're really going to focus on self-awareness and emotional management because they're the foundation, as you can see. And you're also going to find out at the end how you can attend the full training program at no charge. So stay until the end and you're going to find out if you want to get into even deeper into what we learned into emotional connection, that's going to be available to you.
Yeah, and Bill, you know what? I'm going to actually just stop for a second and just name this. On our morning call with our senior team, here's what we feel as an organization. We have something that can help folks. The course that Bill's talking about is a $500 course, but we're going to make this available to you for free with no strings attached, but just because we think it's going to help you, because we think you're going to be able to learn some skills to get through this tough time. Also, because many of us now are at home. We have a bit more time and space because we're not doing much business, so to speak. So please consider taking it. I think you will learn so much. So Bill, why don't we go to our first poll?
Sure. So we just want to hear, you know, what you guys see happening in your organizations. So the poll question is, my organization operates with agility during times of challenge and crisis. And Marianne, I got it. Okay, user error. I have to select the poll. There it is. Now I can launch it. All right, so we'd love to hear from you. How's your organization doing right now during this time of challenge and crisis? Are you seeing them agile? You strongly agree or agree? You know, how are they doing? All right, we'll just give you a few more moments. We got lots of votes coming in. All right, I'm going to close the poll. And by the way, what I see now in terms of sharing the results is, you know, organizations are doing pretty well. I'm so glad to hear that because this is a challenging time. I mean, you know, some of you are seeing, you know, the organization maybe not do quite as well, but a lot of you are seeing your organizations doing well. So that's, I'm really, really pleased to hear that. That's fantastic.
Hey, Bill, I'm going to make a comment on that. That is far above our usual number.
Yeah, it's true.
And I'll tell you what I think I'm seeing, and I'm guessing at this, but I wonder if people aren't coming together, which can happen in a crisis, right? It can bring people together, and that's a beautiful thing, of course, right? So I actually think these numbers are better than our benchmarks because, you know, we survey a lot of folks. I think that's wonderful to see.
You're right. It's actually way better than our benchmarks. So
yeah.
Okay, so we talked about this idea of self-awareness, and so we want to understand when we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling uncertain with everything going on, what's actually going on in the brain. And as a guy with degrees in mathematics and computer science, this was the stuff JP taught me 23 years ago, 25 years ago that I still love today. Many of you may know this, but for those that don't, there's two parts to our brain. There's the emotional part of our brain centered in the small almond-sized part of the brain, and it's what allowed us to learn for the first time. It's also our source of emotional memory. So anytime we faced uncertainty, difficulty, and particularly negative emotions, when it didn't work out, the amygdala, the emotional part of our brain, remembers that. So if somebody criticized us 2 meetings ago and they make a statement, we're more likely to be ready for a criticism, even though they might not be criticizing us. This part of our brain also answers one critical question of human survival. That's fight or flight, which you will notice is the same as avoid or make a mess. So this is the part of our brain that manages our threat responses. Now, we also have the cognitive part of our brain. This is the best part of our brain. This is where our strategic thinking and prioritizing and our forward thinking, where our empathy, all the best parts of our brain are. It's where our prefrontal lobe is, which is where we have working memory. Now, working memory is important because it's where you hold your short-term thoughts. And when we're calm, we all have at least 4 thoughts plus or minus 2. So everyone has at least 4. Sorry, 6 plus or minus 2. So everyone has at least 4 that they can hold on to. And that's what allows us to think complex thoughts. Someone can say something to you, you can access something from long-term memory, you can see options. Now, we use an analogy of markers to represent this working memory. Now, here's the only math we're going to do today. I want you to imagine these markers, and I have 4 of them. How many combinations of these 4 items are there? And a lot of times in an audience, someone will say 16, which is close, but the answer is 24. It's 4 factorial, 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And this is really important because when we're using the best of our cognitive brain and we're in a difficult situation, having to make financial decisions, having to have tough conversations, we've got all of our markers. We can see a lot of options. We can listen. We can respond skillfully. All right, we're going to come back to those markers. So which part of the brain do you think would respond to a perceived threat first? Well, it's probably obvious. The amygdala, the emotional part of our brain. So if you remember nothing else from this session, remember that we feel before we think. We're all wired to respond to something emotionally. And here's the thing, only one of those parts of the brain can be in the driver's seat. So if we're in the jungle and a tiger jumps out at us, we need our emotional system to respond. To jump in the driver's seat, it'll send chemicals into our brain, chemicals into our body. We're ready for fight or flight. Well, we're not in the jungle anymore. So we don't want the emotional system taking over and leading us to make a mess or avoid behaviors. So I'm going to let JP explain now kind of what are the consequences and what happens when we get triggered. By the way, we call that an amygdala hijack. The amygdala literally hijacks our thinking mind and reduces that working memory. So JP?
Yeah. We can think of a hijack as we're being taken to a place where we don't want to go against our will. And that's sometimes what it can feel like, right? Because what happens is the amygdala it processes that information first. It tries to understand, is there a threat? Am I at risk? And if we do feel like we're at risk, like we're going to get eaten, that there's a threat in this uncertainty that we're all experiencing, what happens is we literally can't think straight. We lose complex memory. And so when we go back to the markers, if you think of, Bill talked about the markers. By the way, he was using pens. I'm using markers.
I literally lost my markers. Physically and metaphorically, I've lost all my markers.
There you go. But it's almost like, as Bill talked about, we go through our day and thinking is when we move these around to come up with the best response to the situation that we're facing. But what happens when we're under pressure, when we're facing a last 8% situation, when there's so much change going on, we can literally, and you can watch this, drop a marker. And I literally drop a marker. So the question is, did I just lose 25% of the potential responses in my repository, or did I lose more? And of course, if you go back to the math, we've lost more. Now we're down to 3 times 2 times 1, right? We've lost 75%. And in fact, what happens is as we're going along, let's say Bill and I are having a conversation where, and it gets personal, and I drop another marker, right? Well, guess what? Now I'm into binary thinking, black or white thinking, right or wrong. And from my brain's perspective, who's going to be 100% right and who's going to be 100% wrong? Bill,
I know.
Exactly, right? From his perspective, he's going to be 100% right. From my perspective, I'm going to be 100% right. But we live in gray, we don't live in black and white. And this is when we can start to have impact we don't intend. And this is what I want all of us to really be careful about right now. We're all feeling it. Many people are dropping markers. This is when I think we need to double down on trying to understand, okay, they just impacted me, but was that their intention? And to be kind, to really practice, being kind as much as we can, so we can get more information to truly understand their intention versus just judging them based on their impact.
Yeah, great. And just, just for people, a reminder that the dropping markers is a metaphor for getting emotionally triggered and the degree to which we're emotionally triggered. So, I mean, I don't know about most of you, but some mornings I'm waking up and I'm already down a marker and I haven't done anything yet, right? So we need to be aware of where we're at and how much tension and anxiety we're holding from our emotional system.
Yeah, and Bill, it's a great point. We wake up in the morning and we, what did I do this morning, right? I woke up and I went and grabbed my phone and I checked my usual news sources, and all of a sudden I felt it in my body. I'm not alone. I know many of us on this call do that. I'm going to suggest one of the things that you can do is something called the last 8% morning. The last 8% morning, and this is a totally free thing that you can download. We'll tell you how, but it's actually a morning routine that we've used for over 24 years with Olympic athletes. And we now have it in an audio format. We've been beta testing it in an audio format. And we'll send it to you and you just download it. And as opposed to just jumping on your phone first thing and pumping up the cortisol, we're going to suggest go for a 15-minute walk. This last 8% morning integrates three things: movement, go for a walk; mindfulness, and we guide you through that; and then some mental training exercises that we use with Olympic athletes and our clients. And again, we just want you to have a way to ground yourself so that you don't right off the bat just start dropping markers, pumping out cortisol, because it's going to wear us out. It's going to burn us out. So, we have to really practice self-care. As we know, right? We can't give that which we do not have. So the hallmarks, right? And here's the thing: if you go through the day, cortisol has a half-life of 18 minutes. That means for 18 minutes when we drop a marker, we're not going to be as smart as we normally are. It's going to take time for us to regain our marker. And so that's, again, why we want these tools to manage our brain under pressure. Because if we start dropping markers, well, we avoid or make a mess, right? That's number one. We start to amplify the negative, right? We have a negativity bias. And I mean, that's a real issue. And then number three, emotions are infectious, right? You put 3 people into a room at Harvard Medical Business School where they did a joint study. The person most emotionally excitable, whether negatively or positively, will infect the other 2 people within 30 seconds, whether they say a word or not. So it's almost like, let's lead. Everyone on this call, let's make a commitment to lead, to manage our emotions so we can infect people in a positive way. So we can, not fall into that negativity bias. And then, of course, be careful not to avoid or make a mess.
Yeah, and one analogy that JP taught me is around that negativity is, is it wind or tiger? Because if we're in the jungle and we know there's a tiger around and we hear wind rustling in the bush, what do we assume the wind is? Well, we assume it's a tiger. And we start dropping markers as if it was a tiger, but it wasn't. I mean, now there's 2 tigers, right? There's the one we imagined and the real one.
Yeah.
And right now there are some tigers. There are literally crises happening, but we don't want to be reacting to the wind like it's a crisis.
Yeah.
So becoming aware of and understanding this negativity bias is really critical. And JP, we have a really good question from an audience member, and I think now's a good time to answer the question. And it is, at what point do you need to move from sitting with emotions to actually dealing with them? Try to avoid the negative spiraling. And I think it's once you've hit this point in your awareness that you are aware of whether or not you've dropped markers. You're aware of whether you're amplifying the negative. You're aware of, are you moving to your avoidance? So it's hard. You can't move past it until you have that self-awareness. Once you've recognized it, and we're going to move shortly into a tool to manage it, then you can move to the management. So thank you for that really thoughtful question. All right, so we want to hear from you again, because you're all in environments, and by the way, even before the coronavirus and all of this crisis, there was people around you dropping markers. You might even want to think of yourself. So in the question area, what does it look like? What are you seeing when people, even if they're just dropping one marker, they're just getting a little triggered? What kind of behaviors are you seeing? Some of you might even be sharing some of your own behaviors. So I've shared with you guys a little bit of mine is to become a bit more directive, to be a bit more controlling, to be a bit more interrupting. So some more fight behaviors and some avoiding. I see some coming through, blaming others. By the way, amygdala loves blame, right? If you're an amygdala and you can blame someone else, then you're not in trouble. The amygdala doesn't think, it doesn't know about the future. It only knows about the present and the past. So it doesn't cognate and think, gee, maybe if I blame someone, that'll get me in trouble. Okay, I hear not really hearing other people's input, panicky, people get very quiet or very loud, irritability, not listening, short-tempered and abrasive, shutting down and becoming unresponsive. By the way, these are coming in real fast. Intimidation. Oh, someone blaming myself. That's a tough one, right? That's that internal reputation that JP talked about. So I want you to think back to the impact of all of these things on our external reputation if we're either shutting down or becoming defensive, or and what's happening to our internal reputation. So you're all clearly seeing it. So JP, why don't we just get to one more part of self-awareness and then get to the strategy?
Yeah, I'll just say this as well, Bill. For everyone who's listening, one of the little catchphrases that I think about is when I see behavior that's out of character or out of proportion, that says to me, okay, I know my senior teammates. That's not like her. That's not like him. Okay, something's going on. Maybe they're dropping markers. So just look for that behavior out of character, that's not like them, or out of proportion. That I find helpful.
By the way, the other quote I really like in that moment is, people don't always do things to us, they do things for themselves.
Yeah.
So people
Absolutely.
who are reacting right now, because there was a lot of irritability and snappiness, and they're not trying to make us feel bad. They're stressed, they're under pressure. And can you actually use that as an opportunity to connect? Okay, so this is actually a strategy. The first strategy, how do you know if you're dropping markers? Well, your body is your early warning system. The chemicals released will get released within 85 milliseconds. From the minute you feel that tension, you imagine that scenario, it's in your body. So JP, where do you feel it when you start to drop a marker?
Sure. Well, some of my athletes feel it in the belly, the butterflies or the shoulders or the jaw. I don't. I feel it right here. When I feel heat, that's my first signal that says, JP, you might be dropping markers. For 18 minutes, you might not be as smart as you normally are, if I'm normally smart, or at least as smart as I can be. And so we think of it as our big three. So I want everyone to be thinking right now, what's the one physical fact or signal that says each of us are dropping markers? For me, it's heat. The other two for me, because there's three, one is physical. The other is I get really certain I'm right and they're wrong, which makes sense. I'm dropping markers. And then number three, I want to act right now. I want to answer in this meeting right now. I want to answer that email right now. And so when I feel that sense of urgency, when I sense that sense of certainty and that heat, okay, I know I'm probably down markers. How about you, Bill?
Yeah, I feel it in my chest. my chest gets super tight, and it actually, something resonates right out all the way to my hands. My hands actually tingle. So again, if I'm in a meeting and my chest is tightening and my hands are tingling, then I know I'm down a marker and I'm not going to be at my best. Not only
Yeah.
I can't think as clearly, I can't see as many options, but man, I'm not listening. And then JP, I'm moving to my interrupting, and I'm moving to my not listening, and becoming controlling and overly decisive.
Yeah,
So we
and can
just
I say something to everyone? I mean, Bill's, like all of us, growing his emotional intelligence. He would interrupt 20 years ago and not know it. Now he knows he's interrupting. So, like, just be easy on ourselves. We won't be perfect, but if we can catch it sooner and if we can own it, it goes a long way.
yeah, and I hope I'm interrupting a little bit less.
I think you are.
A quick summary of the brain science of this amygdala hijack of this dropping markers. Your body goes on high alert. That's where you'll feel it first. The chemicals actually stay in your bloodstream for 3 to 4 hours if you don't do anything. That's why when you hear that piece of news on CNN or hear something from your company, it can stick with you if you don't do anything. It can be there all day, and we're more likely to further trigger. The cortisol floods the neocortex, reduces that working memory, reduces how many markers we have. We can't think as clearly. We default to self-protection. It makes sense. The amygdala is there to protect us. That's why it becomes more about us and us being right, and we can't listen. And finally, we get very fixated on the perceived threat, right? My wife actually said to me last night, Bill, you got to stop watching the news. Right? There's not any more additional information you're going to learn. You're getting fixated. And she was so right. And I love that advice. And so all of those things happen. And that losing of our markers, that losing of our working memory, that will happen for up to 18 minutes. As JP said, the half-life of the cortisol is 18 minutes. That's why it's kind of 20 minutes later sometimes when you realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I should have stepped in and said something. By the way, that doesn't mean that at minute 17, some other idiot can't say something that further triggers you and you're in some degree of hijack all day. That can certainly happen to me. The good news is you're not stuck with the 18 minutes. There's strategies that you can use to calm this amygdala, to get your markers back, and get your best cognitive thinking back. Favorite quote of mine in this whole idea is from Peter Drucker. He said, I no longer think that learning how to manage people, especially subordinates, is the most important thing for executives to learn. I'm teaching above all else how to manage oneself. That's the model, right? Focus on ourselves. Okay, let's get to the strategy. So what do we do, right? How do we, now that we've got this self-awareness, we've recognized we're dropping markers, what do we do? Well, we have a strategy that I love called the SOS. JP originally developed this with the US Navy, I think over 24 years ago, and has since refined it in our work with Olympic athletes, businesses, executives. The first S is stop, and that means disconnecting from the trigger. And it doesn't mean stop and avoid. It means stop so that we can recognize what's happening to us and start to get some markers back so that we can act more clearly, more decisively. Now, there's two situations we tend to find ourselves in life, just before we get to oxygenate, JP,
Sure.
Is when we're alone and then when we're in front of someone, or these days on conference calls. When we're alone, get up and stretch, move your body, right? Do a last 8% morning that we're going to talk about later. But even if you just get up, change your body posture. The draft folder was designed for emotional intelligence. Write that email you want to send. Don't put it in the to list just in case. Save it in the draft folder. Go take a break and come back. So when you're alone, you can literally physically take a break. Now, when you're in front of someone, you're on a conference call, well, what can you do? You can't just get up and leave. Well, there's a couple of key things you can do. You can drink a glass of water. Water is very soothing for our physiology. Your fingers will actually start to curl, not into a full fist unless you've dropped all your markers, but open your palms, relax them. If you are in a fight mode, you're leaning forward. You'll find yourself, just lean back. If you're in a flight mode, you'll be leaning back. Just start to lean forward. You don't have to step right in that moment, but it will start to create a pattern interrupt. The cheat sheet we're going to share has all of these examples of stop strategies and more. Now, whether you stop for 6 seconds, 6 minutes, 6 hours, in that time, you want to oxygenate. The intake of a large amount of oxygen carbonizes our blood, which has the physiological effect of minimizing the chemicals the amygdala has released. So you're literally fighting chemistry with chemistry. So let's all do it right now. Everybody just stop and take a deep conscious breath. If you do nothing else as a result of today's session, but the next time you feel that trigger, you feel that crisis coming on, you read that news, you hear that thing, you just stop and take a deep breath. You will be amazed. You'll start to get some markers back. You'll start to be less reactive. You'll start to be able to step in where you might have been avoiding. It's such a powerful tool. JB, I don't know if you want to make a quick comment here on this before I get to the final.
Bill, I think you're doing a great job. This is, I love listening to you. It's helping me, actually. It's awesome.
Okay, well, you taught me all this, so I just want to give credit where credit's due. Finally, you'll notice at this point in time, we haven't done anything cognitive. We've simply done some physical things, right? Moved our body, opened our palms, drank water, taken a deep breath, because by design, when we're triggered, we can't think as clearly. Now that we've got some of our best thinking back, we've got some markers back, now we can seek information. We start by seeking information of ourselves. So for example, is this wind or tiger? Am I overreacting? Is the response I'm about to have the best one? Should I send that email? Should I step in here? Should I have that conversation about finances with my partner? Yes, I do need to. So we start with ourselves, and then we can seek information of others. This is where we get to the connection. What are they going through? When people don't do things to us, they do things for themselves. We can start to have empathy. What are their ideas? Before I start telling people what to do, maybe they can have ideas that might even be better than mine. So we seek information. Using this SOS tool will allow you to step into your last 8% conversations more skillfully. So I hope you're all thinking about moments coming up, last 8% decisions, situations, conversations, where you can practice it. One recommendation I make is that you don't wait until your most difficult moment to practice the SOS, because by design, in that moment, right, you can't think as clearly. So you also want to practice it in less triggering moments. So, for those of you that go to the grocery store and you're in line, and not only are you judging what someone else has in their cart, but you're in the 12 items or less checkout line, and somebody two in front of you has 14 items, because you counted. Stop, SOS right there, right? So just practice wherever you can. A great way that's been helping me practice is JP, and this is hot off the presses, has been creating this last 8% morning. It actually comes from his 20 years of work with Olympic athletes, but it's actually created these podcasts, these audio recordings, where you're not just sitting. I have been meditating. I do work on mindfulness. I'm finding it hard when I'm just sitting. These are walking meditations. This is get out for a walk. I try to do it in the morning. Quite honestly, JP, sometimes it's in the afternoon. But wow, it's just been really helpful for me. So JP, I'll let you describe last 8% morning a little bit more, and then we're going to close things down and let you know where you can get all these resources.
Right. As Bill said, some people have trouble, especially right now when we're so anxious to just sit. So the idea of last 8% morning is go for a 15-minute walk at any time of the day, but it's great in the morning with me in your ear. In fact, it's my kind of morning routine. And so I'll be describing what I'm doing. So we'll be walking together in a sense. And I'm really hoping that a lot of people start to do this, because I think when we embed movement, and there's a whole bunch of great reasons for that, the movement, mindfulness and these mental training exercises, it's a great way to take charge, set the tone for the day, to really build our emotional intelligence. This is the idea. It's a way to remind ourselves of some of the great ideas and practice building, emotional intelligence, build our neural pathways. So when we face those difficult last 8% situations or decisions or conversations, we can do something about it. So, that's probably all I will say, but please let us know if you want us to send that to you. Again, this is just all free. We want to be there to help you, and we think this is one of the ways that we can do that.
All right. So again, favorite closing quote on the whole idea of managing emotions. Dorothy Neville, an English poet, said, "The real art of conversation is not only to say the right thing at the right time, but to leave unsaid the wrong thing in the tempting moment." I mean, she said that over 100 years ago, before social media and text and email, and so just sometimes, I mean, sometimes we shouldn't avoid, we should step in, but sometimes when we step in, maybe we didn't need to, or maybe we didn't need to quite in the way that we did. So I love that closing quote. By the way, we're going to tell you at the end too, actually shortly, how to get the quote. So we just want to summarize and then share with you where you can get all these resources. We hope what you're taking away from this short part of our larger emotional intelligence training program, we are all in a last 8% moment. This is a crisis. How we show up in these last 8% moments will have a huge impact on our external and our internal reputation. Learning to manage our emotions, learning to manage this anxiety is a huge key for ourselves, for the people on our teams and our families. And we can model for our families and our teams. Practice the SOS. You're going to get a cheat sheet that you can actually print out that will walk you through some self-awareness and putting the SOS into practice. And be an aggressive learner. As JP said, you know, aggressive learners extract 3 to 5 times, or high performers extract 3 to 5 times the amount out of, you know, any learning opportunity. So are you going to be one of those high performers who extracts? Okay, so here's the ways you can extract. So JP, let's get them to the BigSpeak, and who just, again, thank you so much to BigSpeak for partnering with us on this. They're going to send you a link. There's going to be a page with some resources. The cheat sheet will walk you through the dropping markers and the SOS. There's a free EQ quiz on our website if you want to get a sense of how you're doing on some EI-related behaviors. The quotes we've used in this program and a whole bunch of our favorite quotes to keep you inspired. So there'll be a whole bunch of stuff on that page. And we're offering to all of you, this is the big one, our, normally $495, 3 2-hour session spread over 3 days, emotional intelligence program at no cost. We know right now budgets for your families, budgets for your businesses are tough, so we're just not charging. So JP, do you want to bring the next one up, show the dates. So these are the 3 dates we have. We do have a limit to how many people can be on them. Someone already texted in or sent a question and said, well, can I offer that free training to people in my business? Yes. If we need to, we will add more dates. So yes, do please offer this to people. I know some of you on the line have already been through our emotional intelligence training and are just coming back for a refresh, but you've got people on your teams or people in your organizations who want it. So again, you will be getting a link. You will be able to use the code, JP, if you want to share this, IHHP guest to sign in. And again, don't feel like you need to frantically write all this down or screen capture this. It's all going to be coming to you in the link tomorrow. But if you want to, you can go to our website now and go to our live online and register as using IHHP guest. So we are just thrilled to offer this to all of you who've stayed in here with us. And finally, for the last 8% morning, because this is still new and hot off the presses, JP's got a site where he's got those available. We don't have it all, set up. So just email JP. It's easy. jp@ihhp.com. He's going to email you back the links. I've been listening to them. They've been really helpful. So just, email JP if you want those last 8% morning recordings.
Hey, Bill, are there some questions that have come in, because we have a few minutes left here before we kind of do our concluding remarks? Are there any questions?
Yeah, we want to give Marianne a few minutes too, but there are some good questions. Here's one that I thought that was very thoughtful. Jeannie, with everything feeling so urgent today and coming from all directions, bombarded in brackets, I feel like I could do this all day long. How do you avoid paralysis? So in other words, I can't just sit and do my SOS and listen to last 8% morning all day long, or I wouldn't get anything done. That's a good question. So JP, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know what? I have a strong opinion about this, which is this is when we need to work and use others. We can't do this alone. And here's the thing: we're now being social. We need to keep social distance, which is a bit of a trap. We have to do that. And by the way, anyone not taking this lightly, please, really respect the social distance imperative right now. but we can't do it alone. And we can't just sit there and just breathe. That's great. That's a good first step. But what we then need to do is work with others. And there's a number of ways you can do that. And so, there's there's so many ways. One is, take this course because it's free and you'll be able to work with others around learning this stuff. But the other thing is within your organization, find those pockets of support and, coach each other. And there's a bunch of things that we can do, but the key is that we can't do it alone. That's maybe the most important thing. Having worked with Olympic athletes and high performers, they can't do it alone. So who's to say we can? We can't. So I'd say reach out. That would be the big thing. The other piece is that by taking a bit of action, right? So one of the things in the morning, last 8% morning, the first part, there's a BID structure we use, a big structure, and that stands for, the first B is make your bed, literally. Because of our work with the Navy SEALs, we've learned you make your bed in your morning. Why? Because it builds a bit of momentum. You had a small victory. It's a bit of point of pride. And then you come back at the end of the day when you feel like this day might have been a bit chaotic, and you come back to a bed that's made, a little less chaos in this chaotic time. So taking small action and working with others are keys. Thanks, Jeannie, for that great question.
Great. So JP, let's go to the next slide. We also love to connect with people on LinkedIn. JP and I share articles, stories, examples. This is cool technology. If you've got a phone and you've got your LinkedIn app, you can literally press the QR code that's up by the search button and point to one of these boxes and connect with us on LinkedIn. So I do want to now leave these last few minutes for Marianne to come on and close on behalf of BigSpeak, and then JP, you and I will do our close. But just for those that have to jump off literally at the hour, just huge thank you, Marianne, for putting this together. And we love our partnership with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We unfortunately, we do have to stop here, but if you have any further questions for JP or Bill or anyone at BigSpeak, or if I see there are still some questions in the chat, please reach out to us. We're here to help and to support you however we can. There were several questions about recording. Yes, all these sessions are being recorded, and we will automatically share those with all of you, as well as anyone who registered and was not able to attend. And the recordings are also available on our website, along with the variety of free resources, including everything that JP and Bill had mentioned. And we'll send those links in the follow-up email with the recordings. And I am definitely going to need those 8% mornings, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Marianne, I've got a question for you. I mean, I think Bill and I still have a bit of time, we're happy to stay on a little bit to answer questions. Like, I know we can formally end, so people, if they need to leave, but we're happy to stay on and just answer questions for 15 minutes if people want to do that as well. So let me kind of make that offer.
Okay, I absolutely appreciate that. I need to end, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I'll compile the questions, and if everyone wants to send them to me, I can distribute them to you, and you guys can reach out. Yeah, I think you guys are such great resources, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time for us. And I know I speak for the whole BigSpeak team when I express how much we enjoy working with you and how much we really, really appreciate this.
Great.
So we do have to wrap it up. So everyone out there in the world, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we'll be talking to Future of Work strategist Heather McGowan. That is scheduled for the same time slot. That's Wednesday, March 25th at 10 a.m. Pacific. And I hope to see you all then. This has been the BigSpeak Webinar Series, which we may or may not have a cooler name for by next week. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we will see you later. Bye.
All right,
Thanks,
good
everyone.
luck applying your SOS, everyone, and do your last 8% mornings. Take care.
Have a great day.